Yo, homies, what is up? Tominator here. So, in this one today, I'm going to be covering the New York Pro 2018 212 division. So, I am aware that there was recently the California Pro, so I'm going to be talking about that in the next video. But for now, I'm still just wrapping up this New York Pro. And I wanted to talk about this because this was a controversial decision, I think. Um, Basically, this was your top two in the 212 division. We had Zane Watson on the left versus Shaun Clarida on the right. Shaun Clarida ended up winning, of course, and Watson had to settle for second. And you know what, man? I got to say I don't agree with this. Usually I do agree with the judges. I think that they're right about probably 90% of the time, if not more. I don't buy into this whole like politics thing as much as most people do. I think that it's kind of exaggerated to a large extent. I think when you actually pay attention and think about what they're looking for as opposed to what you prefer, you'll find that the outcomes usually make a lot more sense. But this is a case where I don't agree with them, and I'm going to explain why as we go pose for pose. But basically, I think that Watson beat this guy in almost every pose except from the back. So let's jump into this. Let's take a look. If you're wondering about the size discrepancy, so Shaun Clarida is a very short bodybuilder. He's listed at only about 5'2", whereas Watson's listed at 5'7". I'm not sure if those heights are entirely accurate, but there's definitely several inches difference between them. So no, Watson's not like standing 3 feet in front of this guy. Okay, he is just that much smaller, Shaun Clarida. So let's jump into it. But I am going to freeze it here now that it's brighter in the front relax pose. I want to point out that Shaun Clarida's shoulders look a little suspect, okay? They look very blocky. I don't know, it's kind of a weird look to them. I'm not going to outright say that he's definitely sight enhancing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was, because they have an odd shape to them, right? And we'll see that in other poses as well. But in the front relax pose, we can already tell certain things. We can already tell that Shaun Clarida is more bloated than Zane Watson. Watson's midsection isn't perfect, and we'll see that clearly in certain poses like the ab and thigh, but it's still much better than Shaun Clarida's. Shaun Clarida was really struggling in transitions, and whenever he let it go, it was downright ugly. And I think that's one of the major factors that should have contributed to his losing this contest. But let's get into the poses here. So the first one, of course, front double bicep. Now, Shaun Clarida has great arms. His arms are better than Watson's. That's just obvious. He's got way more peak and roundness in those biceps, even a little bit more sweep in the triceps, and the forearms as well are better than Watson's. Watson's arms are much flatter, and they're just not quite on the same level, genetically speaking, as Clarida's. But other than that, I pretty much gave every other body part in this pose to Watson. I mean, he's got much better V-taper, flare through the lats. His midsection is much tighter. You can see it's kind of sunken a little bit, whereas Clarida's is the opposite. It's kind of protruding a little bit, and Clarida's chest is much smaller. It looks like it's caving in almost. It just looks very underwhelming in this position, whereas Watson's looks much more square and better. In the lower body department, so basically, I would give it hands down to Watson because not only are his quads bigger, but his calves are too. And the degree of separation between these two guys in terms of conditioning is not that much. Shaun Clarida might have a little bit more detail in those quads, like you can see a little bit of faint feathering there in his teardrops. But is that really enough? Is the difference really that great that he's beating him on conditioning here? I don't think so. I think Watson is actually drier. So we'll see that as these guys go through other poses. But I would give him the front double bicep, Zane Watson. Again, I think the only area that Clarida's beating him there is in the arms, and it's not enough. In the front lat spread, again, I like Watson. Why? He's structurally better. He's wider through the shoulders. So his chest looks better. His V-taper is more pronounced. Again, the legs are bigger and better than Clarida's. Clarida looks a little squashed. He's wide through the back, relatively speaking, but he's very narrow through the shoulders. He's kind of like Phil Heath in that sense, where he's just structurally limited upstairs, and it's making his chest look very small. It's making it's diminishing the effect of his V-taper here in this pose. Again, his arms look good, but it's the front lat spread. It's not the front arm spread. Okay, so he's losing this pose as well. And when they turn to the side now, you can see Watson there. When he lets go, he's got some distension in his midsection as well. So he's not perfect in that area either, but he's still better than Clarida. Now, Clarida here, let's see if we can get Watson in it too. Okay. Clarida, I will say his arms look better again. His shoulder, I think, looks a little bit better in the side chest, but that's about it. Otherwise, I'm giving it to Watson again. I think that Watson is just so much bigger, and that's obvious. He's literally dwarfing this guy, and he's just got so much more mass and muscle upstairs here. He looks much wider. Of course, he's opening up a little bit more, and that's emphasizing that, but Clarida just looks very small. He looks narrow. And he's just not really filling this pose out upstairs. So in the lower body, it's close. But again, I'd give the edge to Zane Watson just because of the size. So Clarida's pecs look maybe a little thicker than Watson's just because of the angle that he's hitting it. But Watson's are just so much broader. So I prefer him. Now, when they turn around, this is where Clarida definitely makes up some ground. And I think he pretty much slams the door on Zane Watson from the back. Because in the back double bicep, this one, I'm just going to wait for Watson to get in it more. This one's pretty much no contest, I think. Other than the width factor that Watson has, he has a bit of an advantage in that aspect. He's a little bit better through the hamstrings and the calves as well. But through the back, through the glutes, through the arms, Clarida is cleaning up here. So Clarida actually looks a little similar to a small Flex Wheeler from the back, especially after Flex was accused of synthol later in his career, where once again we can look at those delts looking a little suspect in my opinion. But either way, I think that Clarida looks better in this pose. He's got so much more thickness in the back. His arms are definitely better, way more peak on those biceps and roundness and everything through the delts. Whether or not it's real muscle, who knows? But either way, I think that he's pretty convincingly winning this pose now. Even though Watson's bigger again and better than him in a couple of key areas, like I mentioned, the hamstrings, the calves, it's not enough. So Clarida takes the back double quite handily. And he's actually going to take the rear lat spread too. Even though he's narrow, Watson might be a little wider in terms of raw width because he just has that overall size advantage, but he doesn't himself have a very good V-taper in this pose. I thought it would be actually a little bit better than he's showing us here. And again, Watson's better in the hamstrings and the calves, but not in the glutes, and I don't think in the back either. I would still go with Clarida on this one. And even though he's not the widest guy, it's kind of like a Phil Heath sort of thing he's got going on here. Not to that extent, mind you. I'm not saying he's as good as Phil Heath in the rear lat spread, but just in terms of being a narrower guy with still showing some thickness and a little bit of detail in the back in the rear lat spread. So yeah, I would give him the rear lat spread and the back double bicep. So he wins those two poses from the back. I think that is pretty clear. I don't think it's too controversial to say that. But I don't think he wins anything else. That's what it is, man. In the side tricep, I don't think Clarida hits it that well, to be honest. When he turns to the front kind of like this, it's not really a good look because his weak points are his chest and his abdomen. So why are you going to kind of show those off even more than necessary? I think he should hit it probably more like Zane Watson here. He's turned more to the side. Again, Clarida's arms are better, and we can see that. He's got more mass and roundness, but in this position here, it's not really that noticeable. And I would give it to Zane still. I think he's hitting the pose more effectively. Neither one of them are really knocking it out of the park, though. And I could see an argument being made for Clarida there, because it's not like Zane really nailed it either. But personally, I'd still go with Zane. In the ab and thigh, this should have been a runaway for Zane, but I'm going to show you why it's not. Okay, when he hits it, you can look at the obliques there just spilling out, and it completely destroys his flow and his lines. His outline is kind of compromised by that. I mean, look at it. It looks like a teardrop there on the side. Like, on the side of his stomach, he's got a friggin' teardrop. It looks weird. So that's a glaring flaw. I can see why he didn't hit this pose in his posing routine. At least I believe he didn't. He avoided it, I'm pretty sure. Because it really just isn't a good look. It doesn't really showcase his physique in a positive light. But he's still better than Clarida, I think. He's got sharper serratus muscles. He still has a better V-taper, and his legs are still bigger. So if we go back to Clarida when he's actually hitting this pose, I'm going to wait for him until he's fully flexing his abs. let's see. Pretty much right here, I guess, is about as good as it gets for him. Even when they're fully flexed, they're very faded. You can still tell that he's bloated through the stomach. And yeah, he has those thick, blocky ab muscles. So he's definitely got muscle there, but it's just not streamlined. And I don't think it really looks that good. He has no taper. He's definitely holding a film of water. Whereas this is why I was saying I think Watson's drier. Look at his abs, how much more defined they look, how much sharper they look. Okay, I'm going to play it out now. So I would still give Watson the ab and thigh, but again, neither guy really looked great in it. In the most muscular, you can see all sorts of roundness in Clarida's physique, good vascularity through the pecs and shoulders here as well. Again, very narrow though, so that's going to hurt him, especially next to a wider competitor like Watson, who I think looks 100 times better through the pecs, better through the delts even, because even if his delts aren't quite as round as Clarida's, they look harder, they look more conditioned, and he's definitely better through the traps. The arms would probably go to Clarida still, but maybe not even, because Watson's are, again, more grainy, they're just drier and harder, and Clarida's look very smooth. And downstairs, it's Watson. So I would give Watson the most muscular as well. So that's what it is, guys. I really think that Zane Watson, deserved to win this show. I think that you could even say that he was robbed. And I don't use that term lightly. I don't ever like to say a guy was robbed because so many people bring that word up again and again. And it's almost lost meaning in bodybuilding. It just sounds like a cop-out. It sounds like excuse making. But in this instance, I only gave 2 poses to Clarida, okay? I think he only won in the back double and in the rear lat spread. Is that enough to win a show when you're losing the other 6 poses? No way in hell. So I think Zane Watson was the rightful winner. I think the judges actually got it wrong this time around. And one more thing is that Watson had a great posing routine. It was very elegant, very well choreographed. He was hitting all sorts of old school artistic poses. And you can tell he put a lot of time and effort into it. Whereas Clarida's was fine, he got the job done, but it was completely forgettable. There was nothing special about it. And I know they're not judged on the posing routines, which is a shame because I think if they were, that would have propelled Watson ahead here. And I think he probably would have come out on top if they had factored in the posing routines because his routine was much better. So that's all for this one, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, what you thought about this. I think it's pretty controversial that Clarida actually had a perfect score in this finals posing round, and Watson was unanimously voted second. I think that's bullshit, to be quite frank. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, and thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.